The story begins with some sad guy. From his look it is clear that something is bothering him. It was as if he had found himself in a difficult situation with no way out. There was also a girl in the guy's company. Also beautiful, also upset, dirty, but at the same time surprised by the words previously spoken by the interlocutor. Their conversation was quite normal for their unusual situation. The guy, looking up, said that he runs slowly and no amount of training helps. The girl was surprised by this. Apparently, she did not expect such a conversation in such circumstances. When the girl nodded in agreement and quietly said that she understood him, the guy began his story, namely that no, she doesn't understand, because he really runs very slowly. Even once upon a time, during his school years, no, even in kindergarten, he always came last, was always the most tired and could hardly stand on his feet after a race. He also said that his so-called friends in those years initially offended him, and in order to humiliate him even more, they began to quickly run away, not giving him a chance to catch up. Well, he still continued to run after them, although they seemed to simply believe that he would never catch up with them. The girl said that he was really running slowly, but the guy said that even if he didn't give up, and it was precisely the fact that he did not give up that allowed the guy to run to one of the guys in an instant and touch his back from behind. Telling the story about this, he almost beamed, and when the girl asked how he managed it, he said that it was all thanks to his perseverance. In general, this story inspired him now not to give up either. Are you wondering who and why he had to surrender? It's just that this time the guy and the girl were really in trouble. Especially when one of them was holding her bloody stomach. The same knife lay right in front of them, and the guy promised himself, this cave, the girl that this time he would go to end. While drops of blood flowed down the girl's lower lip straight to her chin, she smiled sincerely, saying that despite the fact that he does not run fast, he is still a mature person. Perhaps he was simply trying to somehow improve the morale of the girl who was nagging him. He said that he refused to surrender so easily into the hands of the assassins and would not give up until the last moment, but the girl replied that he was really weak, but she was glad to hear that. And despite the sad words of his interlocutor, he continued. Further, they were told that he would run away if they caught him, that if he survived, he would take care of his health and that he would live to be 100 years old. And the last thing was worst of all, because he knew that he couldn't do it. There was no further response to any of his words. There was not even a quiet huh. The interlocutor's breathing was not heard. She is no longer there, she will no longer answer anything, ever. It was not fate to say goodbye to a loved one calmly, and within a few minutes after the girl's death, loud screams and voices were heard that were eager to find them. They found it faster than the guy expected. And he must keep the promises he made earlier to his girlfriend. He must live, which means he must run now. Looking at the lifeless body, he promised the last thing to himself, because she was already dead, as if he would come back for her, he would bury her with dignity. The way she deserved it. They were extremely close. Now, despite the fact that he doesn't know how to run, it's time to run away. Yes, as quickly as possible. After all, there is a choice between death and life. He ran because of a promise he made to a girl named Seo Hui. It was she who exhaled her last breath today right in his arms. Memories flashed back to my battle with cancer. IVs, a hospital bed, the desire to simply die as quickly as possible rather than live like this. But instead of the well-deserved peace, he was reborn in the Mirim family. The main character was very lucky that he ended up in one of the 7 great clans. It was incredible luck for him. Then he became part of the Baek clan, founded by the greatest martial artist, the Sacred Blade of Immortality. But this, of course, was not without problems. After all, already here his new body is suffering from blockage of chi channels. This is a disorder in which the body is unable to store vital energy chi. Patients with this disease often died before the age of 20. Such an illness was critical for a member of the main branch of the warrior clan. Therefore, everyone condemned the guy with just one glance, because he was a nobody. For them he did not even deserve special attention, because he would die anyway. So the main character left 7, at the age of 20. And then he went to a remote place to await his death there. He simply had no other choice. But he was lucky not to be alone. lucky not to be completely isolated. And so, as company, he had So-hwa, a sweet girl, kind. It even began to seem to him that such a quiet life was not so bad. But, unfortunately, nothing lasts forever. Therefore, their idol was destroyed by something that has not yet ended, even having already taken one life. This time it was not his legs that failed him, but his luck. The guy, without even thinking that this could happen, ran into a dead end. And they were already on their tail. At the end of this room, if you can call it that, there was only a rusty sword stuck in the ground. Of course, this is unlikely to help him in any way. But who knows, a miracle might happen. Without hesitation, the main character ran to the weapon. Having examined it more closely, he realized that this would not even cut vegetables, and if he had to fight, it would certainly not cut a person. In any case, it's better than nothing. It was not difficult to pull it out, but despite this, the sword was quite heavy. His mental reasoning was broken by a loud, very sharp male cry, "Gotcha!" And then, just then, the main character realized that this could be the end of him. What bothered the guy and killed his only girlfriend was a huge number of guys dressed all in black, with their faces covered. By the way, one of them, probably the main one, mocked the main character, saying that it was not appropriate for a member of such a clan to run away like a rat. The guy, remembering his promise to the lady, decided to be brave until the very end. He, without fear, said that it was not proper for a worm like this man to open his mouth to him. Bringing his eyebrows to the bridge of his nose, he continued in a serious, angry tone, asking his opponent how he even dared to point the blade towards a member of the Beck clan. And if he identifies himself and falls at the feet of the main character, begging for forgiveness, then he will have a chance for pardon. While a dozen men were looking at him, he tightly clutched the handle of the sword with a sweaty palm. Still, he hoped that they wouldn't touch him. From such impudence on the part of the guy, the man even beamed and sharply pulled off his mask, introducing himself as Chokpyo-ra. This made his eyes widen in shock and ask if he had come for his soul, right? When he received a rather rude, but expected answer, he decided that he would be brave to the end and cautiously pointed his sword towards the enemy. No, he won't give up this time either. Not to say that this behavior of the guy surprised the elder. No, he was not amazed, rather he was glad that a member of such a clan turned out to be not as cowardly as the rumors said about him. It was difficult to remain calm, it was difficult to hold the sword, knowing that you still would not win. It seems that something began to rumble inside the guy. He was so scared that he wouldn't keep his promise. And the only thing he definitely lacked was the old, semi-transparent spirit nearby, reporting that the guy was holding the sword wrong. The young man even jumped back in surprise. No, really, at such a tense moment, an old man appeared right next to him, semi-transparent, damn it. Moreover, my grandfather began to escalate things. Examining the guy, it seems that the old man grimaced and condemned with just one glance. But he could not remain silent and openly expressed what he thought about the guy. And while the guy was talking with his grandfather, his opponents did not see anyone there. In general, no one thought the guy was really fucked up. What was most striking was that no one saw him, this grandfather, except him. They thought that he was delusional out of fear. Taking a sip, he decided that this was apparently his ancestor, but already dead. Memories of my deceased friend came flooding into my head. So-hwa. Only for her sake will he continue his struggle. The enemy of the protagonist was already a little disappointed in the guy, believing that he had definitely overestimated him. After all, out of fear, as it seemed to them all, he either spoke to the air, or fell into thought. In the hands of his enemy, he saw an unusual weapon, the chi sword. He is much stronger than he seems at first glance. But the guy had already decided to fight to the very end in order to meet So-hwa with honor. True, the old man was definitely distracting. Continuing the dialogue with him, he asked if the younger one had even learned to wield a sword, because he was not even able to hold it correctly. To which the main character said that his chi channels are blocked and, in principle, he doesn't really need this. The old man concluded that his relative was not polite to him at all, but he could not help but meddle in his own business and with a suspicious grin towered over the young man. The last thing the guy heard from the old man was that he would borrow his body for a short time. Immediately after this, something happened that was hard to feel, hard to understand. Does it seem like someone has taken over his body? At that same moment, the enemy, without losing the opportunity, already furious, but at the same time, satisfied and meanly grinning, swung his strongest weapon, attacking at that moment while the guy was again distracted. Well, at least that's what it seemed to him. The guy, immediately, one might say, without even realizing it, raised his sword, which he was holding in his hands, and instantly stopped the enemy's attack. The man with the scar instantly drew his eyebrows to the bridge of his nose. Oh yes, this is exactly what he did not expect, because the main character seemed to him just a brat who, not only would not be able to attack, but would not even be able to simply defend himself. With the same rusty, useless sword, he knocked the sword out of the enemy's hand, and he himself was blown back by the blow. It seems that now that same brat no longer controlled his body. After all, even the look was not his. That's right, because now his body, was possessed by his old, powerful ancestor. And only in the subconscious could he think at least something and understand that he simply could not control his body. Every movement, every blow was delivered by him, but at the same time, unconsciously, the main character felt incredible strength in his hands. One he had never felt before. All the power was concentrated in his weapon and it seemed as if several seconds had passed, but no, not even a moment had passed before a fatal blow followed on all his enemies. The one who initially dared to brazenly attack the guy was probably cut in half, but the rest were just hit by a wave. But this just a wave also contained such a force that no one could survive against. A second, and there were a dozen dead men in the room, huge pools of blood. These people were clearly lucky, because it was quick and almost painless. After the end of the battle, the old man immediately emerged from his exhausted body, and the main character, almost lifeless, but still breathing deeply, fell to the cold ground, bleeding. He was overcome by the thought that if he could wield such power, his girlfriend would now be fine, alive and well. And, perhaps, this would not have happened at all. Finally, a translucent old man did not allow him to close his eyes, saying that this was his last help to his dying descendant. Indeed, even if he died now, during the battle, the only thing that would change is that he could not keep his promise to his deceased girlfriend. And so he will die later. But with the feeling that he did not betray his promise, the old man admitted that he himself had put the main character to death. After all, such power was deadly even for him. This did not support the younger one from speaking at all. And it shouldn't have been, but the guy's ancestor didn't finish there. Until the guy passed out, his ancestor continued to talk. And he said something that made the main character open his mouth in surprise. It turns out that there are wonderful medicines like the purest milk of heaven and earth, or 1,000-year-old snow ginseng. And they could bring him back to life once and for all. The old man, like the guy, believed that this was a dialogue between them, so the ancestor did not leave, and the main character decided to continue the conversation and ask the question that had become a lump in his throat after he heard about the medicines. In a hoarse, rather quiet voice, the guy, remembering, asked the old man if the ginseng he ate could have worked, but that was a year ago. To this the old man answered hesitantly that no, most likely he could not. But this is not certain either. But for some reason the young man could not hear the answer. And suddenly everything around, even though it was already dark, still darkened several shades. Everything blurred, the view of the beautiful moon disappeared, and the old man's face darkened and blurred in different directions with every second. Next we see a picture depicting a happy man conveying some good news. And he rejoiced, thus informing the brother of our main character that, to his great surprise, the young man looked much better and he could very well survive. The older man, with a beard, was the doctor of their great family, and the other, young man was the second son of the Beck family, the younger brother of Beck Yegan. His name was Beck Ha-young. The man asked if the guy was given any special medicine, something like that 1,000-year-old ginseng, because only this could really help the main character survive. This was answered in the form of a stern, generally uncomprehending look. The doctor quickly realized what the problem was. After all, who in their time would waste such valuable resources on the living dead? This awkward silence was broken by the main character, who quietly hummed and moved, which made him attract the doctor's attention and smile sincerely. Without waiting for his older brother to wake up, Baek Ha-jun turned around and headed out of the room. The doctor, to be honest, was surprised and asked if Ha-jun wanted to be with his brother when he woke up. To this, the guy irritably replied that as soon as his brother gets better, let him go into the Red Dragon Hall, because the patriarch of the family wants to find out something from him. The doctor, confused, wanted to say that after their master wakes up, he will need to recover for a long time, but the interlocutor loudly closed the door behind him and left. In general, as it might seem, Baek Ha-jun was angry that his brother woke up. After all, if this had not happened, if he had died, in general, his situation would have improved much. But still, such an attitude was too cruel. The main character stood up sharply, whispering the name of his girlfriend. It seems that all this time, their last conversation was stuck in his head, the desire to fulfill all the promises made to them at that moment. He seemed to believe that her death, that last conversation was all a dream, or hallucination, but not reality. Therefore, as soon as he got up, he asked where she was, to which the doctor replied that the maid's funeral had long since ended. 2 whole weeks had passed since her death and that day. These words echoed somewhere in his chest. For 2 weeks, for 2 whole weeks he did not come to his senses, he did not even attend the funeral of his only truly close person. Due to the fact that the words were stuck in the guy's throat, he couldn't really say anything. Wanting to change the subject as quickly as possible, he asked about the sword he had found, to which he was informed that the doctor immediately took that rusty sword out of his hands and handed it to the patriarch of their family. Immediately, he rose from his bed, hastily pulling on something to keep him warm and cover the shirt he had slept in for 2 weeks. He knew that the patriarch was waiting for him, so he did not hesitate. The doctor was very surprised by this, because the guy only woke up a few seconds ago, and the doctor could not contain his surprise. He asked the young man whether it was hard for him. Now, after everything that happened to him, according to the calculations of the man himself, the main character should suffer from pain. The main character simply said that this pain is nothing compared to what he has already experienced. He thanked the doctor for saving his life and, saying goodbye, went to the exit of the room. The doctor did not say anything after the leaving patient. But it flashed through my mind that everyone who calls this guy weak or lazy are complete fools. He experienced as much as each of those who dared to condemn him did not experience. Despite his pain, he always got up and moved on. He only walked forward. It was difficult for the guy to move quickly, because his fragile body ached, painfully reminding him of all the wounds and damage. But he finally came to a place where they no longer hoped for his return. More precisely, maybe they didn't want to hope. When he arrived, the servants informed the patriarch of the family that the young master had arrived, and he, in turn, immediately responded to let the guy in. When he entered this hall, with every step, an obsessive anxiety and excitement grew within him. His breathing quickened to stop worrying. He began to inhale and exhale deeply, in the hope that he would become at least a little calmer. No. But what a sincere surprise there was on his face at the moment when he saw him again. God, it seems for a moment he thought that he was still sleeping. He saw that same old man again. Oh gods, who? But he definitely didn't expect to see him here. The guy understood that he was called here for a reason, and this weirdo was hanging over the patriarch of the family right now. And it was very distracting. Next, we can learn a little history of the protagonist's family. Lead years ago, when the era of dominance of the sacred blade of immortality ended, and the number of bearers of the Baek surname was declining, the great Baek clan finally found hope thanks to another patriarch of their family, and this patriarch's savior became Baek Ryu-san. Majestic, powerful, incredibly strong and sensible patriarch. It was impossible to disobey him, even if you didn't want to obey at all. In all his 2 lives, the guy could not even imagine that he would see the ghost of an ancestor of his current family. The ghost, interrupting in their world, decided to consider the current patriarch of the family. He constantly ran back and forth, looking at the interior, then at the elders, then at their head. And this made the main character turn even more pale, and his eyes ran after the old man, which looked quite strange. It flashed through the guy's thoughts that in this life he would never have thought that he would see a ghost descendant rushing back and forth and boldly examining the elders and his father from head to toe. But what struck me most from the old man's actions was that he not only allowed himself to brazenly examine the man from all sides, but also to grab the patriarch's beard with his semi-transparent fingers. The guy exhaled with some relief, glad that this madman at least didn't pull the patriarch's beard. But he did not behave at all befitting a great descendant. The guy's face changed every minute due to the old man's various actions, but since no one saw this so-called descendant, milking everyone, and especially for the patriarch, it was extremely strange that the main character stepped in his face, and his emotions changed at a rapid rate. The man seemed seriously angry at this behavior. After all, the guy didn't even bow when he arrived, and he's already behaving badly, and everyone else present nearby looked askance at the main character. After all, from the outside he really looked abnormal. The guy immediately understood what was going on and the reason for such glances in his direction, so he immediately fell to his knees and bowed his head, guiltily apologizing for his strange actions. The conversation turned to those who had previously attacked Yi Gang, or rather, Ryu Xiong decided to ask if the main character had any ideas about who could have brazenly attempted on him like that. Such a rude voice probably gave the guy goosebumps. It's good that he didn't see the gaze fixed on himself. Although he raised his head, the patriarch's gaze did not seem to frighten him, and he himself began to remember what happened to him about 2 weeks ago, because even then he had assumptions about who made the unsuccessful attempt on his life. He suggested out loud that they were guys from the demonic alliance. Moreover, they were just aware that their family continued to accumulate power. The main character had no particular desire to falsely accuse someone of anything, so he quickly said that it was unlikely that it was them and he would not be able to give an exact verdict. The guy didn't finish, so he continued his monologue. He said that he had not seen their techniques, but the assassins hardly belonged to the demonic alliance, because they would never touch a member of the Paek clan. They are in their right mind. Yes, even if they went crazy, they would not touch him, who is the heir. True to all the guy's words, the elder simply deliberately touched his mustache and said that the main character had changed a little since the last time he saw him. Immediately after this, he switched to the previous topic and in the end emphasized everything by saying that Yi Gang still does not have a ready verdict and is uncertain in every word he says. The patriarch could not keep silent about something that also surprised him extremely. The only survivor among everyone who was there was only the main character, even though we don't know our character until his first battle. But it seems that this conversation with his father was the bravest in his life, or rather, the way he clearly and factually, without fear, says what he thinks. What was most noticeable from the reactions of everyone present there was that the guy really became braver. Looking straight into the eyes of the patriarch of their family, he said that he was very glad that after this battle he was able to survive and open his eyes again. It seems that from such courage, the patriarch even grinned. It felt like the younger one hadn't been passed out for 2 whole weeks, but was meditating somewhere in the desert, pondering his short life. The elder, in a loud, even more serious voice, demanded that the main character rise up to him and approach him, to which the guy only raised his head in confusion, looking into the eyes opposite. When the patriarch once again repeated that he should get up, slowly, thinking about what this was for, the main character gradually headed towards the elder. As soon as the guy stood up, the patriarch stood above him, standing tall, with a straight back and a stern look. And he wanted to know how a sick man who did not know well how to wield a sword got rid of all the attackers so easily and simply. It was clear from his facial expression that the question had clearly taken him by surprise. Although he thought about this turn of events, he still didn't know what to say. Yes, he could try to tell the truth. But the patriarch's reaction clearly would not have been as positive as he imagined. So in this situation you can only lie, because if you tell the truth, they will consider you crazy. The young man said something about how as soon as he entered the room, There was some kind of surge of strength, and then his body began to move on its own, as if the instinct of self-preservation had worked and he fought back. Then something happened that surprised everyone. The patriarch himself said that this was too scary, and a few moments later, he grabbed the main character's hand tightly. He held tightly, and something began to happen around their hands. That is, something for us. In their world it is quite normal. Around the patriarch's hand, which grabbed Yigon's hand, a blue radiance that was not yet clear appeared. He sat back down on his throne, causing the younger one to bend over straight above him. Everyone around began to stir. Some screamed for their patriarch to stop this, some already wanted to come over. He still continued to hold the main character's hand tightly, and he brought his eyebrows to the bridge of his nose and raised his stern gaze, analyzing out loud that his body condition had not changed, his strength had not increased, and this was, at least, strange. Apparently, the patriarch finally came to his senses, or the screams of the servants and elders reached his ears. He let go of his hand, exhaled tiredly and indifferently turned his head to the side. After that he added that Yigon could be free. True, the main character wanted to say something else, or, to be more precise, ask for something, so he quietly attracted the patriarch's attention. And Gon simply asked that his sword be returned to him, with the help of which he is still alive, although for others, as to him at the beginning, the sword seemed like a simple piece of iron. The patriarch added sarcastically that, now, there and Yanchik already wants to play at being a warrior. But still, with the help of his special strength, he raised a sword into the air from a distance, which he carefully and very smoothly moved through the air. And then he simply threw this sword at the main character's chest, although he successfully caught it. Although the fingers were thin and fragile, they were quite dexterous. The guy did not react to this action in any way. There was no anger, no sadness, no surprise. It seems that he has simply become accustomed to this attitude and has stopped reacting. Then the young man simply bowed and thanked the man. Although the patriarch did not speak to him normally, nevertheless, this so-called ancestor of his continued to be nearby, and for now he was complaining that their new family patriarch was either blind or stupid for calling this sword a simple, rusty piece of iron. The old man complained, or rather was indignant, that they could not recognize the legendary sword, to which the guy asked again about what kind of sword it was and whether it was really legendary. The ancestor shared information that the sword was made of meteorite metal. Its name is Meteor. And the sword itself was the favorite weapon of our spirit. The main character was very surprised at this presentation, because the elders kept it like this. And to this the old man said that most likely it was just a fake, because he was 100% sure that the original was right in Yigon's hands. When the conversation about weapons came to an end, the old man approached the second topic. He said that the patriarch was as cold-blooded as a snake, and it was strange that a father could hate his own child so much. The young man, thinking a little, looked up somewhere, thinking. After a second, he confidently said that he didn't think his father hated him that much. He remembered how he saw his father with the doctor, and they, as always, in principle, talked about Yigon. Only the conversation was secret, because the father of the main character either found, or else wanted to be found, that same sacred food, which, according to legend, would improve his condition. This memory always made my soul feel very warm. This really made him smile, although the old man said that today he definitely didn't see his best side. Their conversation developed further about the patriarch of the family. The old man began to go further, saying that, most likely, the guy's father does not know how to openly express his love for his eldest son. We are returning to the patriarch. He had just received a massage using internal energy, to which the man breathed a sigh of relief. The doctor suggested that it was probably difficult for the eldest, to which he replied that his son, Yigon, was probably much worse now, because his body was in terrible condition. The patriarch said that he was able to do everything only thanks to the efforts of the doctor. Although, to be honest, it is not entirely clear what he is talking about at the moment. His interlocutor replied that since this was the case, the doctor should be thanked. The man was again not in the mood. He became so dull, it seemed as if he was angry about something, although no, it didn't look like anger. Rather, he was worried about something. And to his great surprise, He was concerned about his own behavior and attitude towards his son. It seems that the patriarch was completely upset about this, bowed his head and sadly asked in his own voice whether he had been too harsh, since they had not seen each other for so long. But he really missed his own son. To this his interlocutor, like everyone who would have heard such words from a man who was seemingly a cruel, strong man, would never have dared to accuse him of such a thing, said that he was not cruel at all, and that the gentleman will understand him and will not blame him. But it didn't end with words of support. The patriarch's interlocutor replied that, after all, the young master, or rather his words, worried him a little. At this the elder raised his head questioningly. One of these two, at the same time remembering what Yi Gan had been like all his life, suggested that perhaps something was beginning to awaken in him that had been dormant until that time and did not want to manifest itself. The person who said that something was awakening in the main character was the patriarch's interlocutor, and later recalled that their patriarch said the same thing when Yi Gan was very young, that two geniuses were born in their family. To this, the elder replied that it was in vain to say such a thing, because even if his words were true, they would only encourage people who wanted to make Yi Gan the main heir. And no matter how hard it may be for him to say something like this, the patriarch seems to be very strong in spirit, a cruel man, cold-blooded even towards his own son. Said that all he really wanted was for his son, Yi Gang, to live out his life in peace and quiet. The interlocutor asked for forgiveness for what he had said earlier, and the patriarch, having come to his senses, straightened his back and said that in any case it was impossible to leave things like this. Next we will see a beautiful building. One of them was the Ruby Training Hall, where our main character and his ancestor had just arrived. Their topic of conversation never seemed to change much. It's just that now, the young man was sitting in the lotus position in the training room, and, by the way, in the literal sense of the word, the same old man was hanging over him. They talked about, or rather, the ancestor himself asked, about whether it is really true that the father of the protagonist behaves so disdainfully in order to justify the position of the second son as the main heir. To this, Yi Gang responded positively, and the old man said that the patriarch of the Baek clan was a weakling to fall for such manipulations by the elders. Suddenly the young man said that it was all the fault of people like this old man who was hanging over him. When he asked questioningly, the young man said that people like him, like an ancestor, live unusually long. And because of this, many senior members of the Baek family are still alive. And who dares to contradict the elders? They are smarter, wiser, they are more respected and appreciated by both the people and the family itself. Wanting to avoid such a conversation, the old man gently hinted that he now understood why young people were once forced to respect adults. To this, Yi Gan said that the ancestor should not avoid the topic. But the main character himself somehow didn't want to continue this topic, but rather get down to business, because he was already ready for everything that this old man could teach him. The old man looked down at the boy, wondering out loud how a guy could use internal energy when chi was separated from the bloodstream. And he, surprisingly for the guy, said that everything is actually easier than it seems. And Gon was very happy about this. It seems he even beamed. And then the ancestor broke everything down and said that it was enough for the guy to just die. But then a more serious conversation began. The elder said that he didn't literally need to die, he just needed a different approach. After that, he asked if his so-called disciple knew what the essence of carbon copying the chi channels was, to which the main character answered what he was taught. As if this was a rare disorder in which the chi flow meridians were blocked and this was the wrong answer. Then the old man began to explain. Chi circulates inside all living beings, and if chi energy really didn't flow inside the guy, he would have stopped breathing long ago. In short, chi is water, meridians are riverbeds. And when the channels are blocked, the chi river is more like a low water stream. The main character quickly grasped what the old man wanted to tell him and asked that if he survived, he could study martial arts if he expanded his channels. But the ancestor only said that it would be nice, but, unfortunately, impossible. The old man said that he had chopped up quite a few people, but he had never seen the meridians inside them. In short, you can see everything in a person, bones, organs. But to see what is given by God, that is, to see the soul, is impossible even for the wisest elders or glorious warriors. The old man added that the moment he possessed the young man and was able to control his body, he became the connecting part between his body and his chi. Next, our main character began a real lecture from his ancestor. It's as if God is directly connected with the will, and the energy is in the inner core of the body. He used the will of the mind to trick Yigon's body, his body and mind, and his mind was changed by the influence of sacredness. It seems that this made the guy's ears smoke. The protagonist, admiring himself, stopped him and asked him to explain in simple words what he meant. The answer came instantly: if our Yigon works hard, then the blockages in the chi channels can be connected again. The guy was already mentally praying that a lecture would not start about how in life, in order to achieve a goal, you need to pray. In his native dimension, he heard this all the time. It wasn't enough to be bothered here. Next, the old man asked if our main character had studied the mystery meridian technique, to which he received the answer that the guy trained this technique to take care of himself. The Beck family has always had its secrets, like every noble family. It was precisely in the new family of our protagonist that there was a secret, which was the immortal martial arts. It lies mainly in the fiery sun-mind technique and the Taiyun meridian. The flaming sun-mind technique allows one to quickly gather large amounts of energy, and the Taiyun meridian is needed to purify the mind. Next, the elder asked about something related to the topic of their conversation, and then grinned and said that the Taiyun meridian was not completed. But when the ancestor entered the body of his descendant, he completed the meridian, telling the young man that, most likely, it would be useful to him. The old man said right away that he was unable to cure the disease, but now he could teach the guy something, and even this made the younger man's eyes shine. The extinguished faith, hope, and need for love shone in them. At that moment, the main character almost begged for the elder to teach him. I gave him everything he could, everything that a guy is able to do, learn, except, he is ready to do it. And since these words, about 6 hours have already passed. The main character, with his extended hand, clenched it into a fist, as if he kicked the ghost. But that's why he's a ghost, that the hand went through. That's how they trained. The elder admitted that his student's fighting spirit does not go anywhere, but at least his confidence and stubbornness make themselves felt. And then the ancestor ordered him to start over. The essence of the Taiyun meridian was to express one's will in reality. The elder, by the way, at least somehow strengthened the young man's fighting spirit, saying that all the main character really needs to try to do is put as much strength into his fist as possible. He seems to be a quick learner. In 3 years he can know a lot of things. In 10 he can be better than his ghost ancestor himself. In fact, the elder really liked this boy. He was even glad that he would train him. Of course, in addition to this, the ancestor knew that the reality for which the young man strives is unattainable unless he dies, and then resurrects and overcomes adversity over and over again. But a 14-year-old boy will never reach that level of awakening. The young man remembered the last moments of his past life. He will probably never forget what he felt at that moment, how his body was rotting and becoming soil. He remembered what he felt, he remembered what he thought. I remembered how his bones crumbled and became nothing, and now he will take advantage of this moment in his life. He will put it into his fist, gather all the strength, energy, everything. When the old man, interested, with a slight smile on his lips, turned his head towards his current student, he saw a fist a few centimeters from his face and a serious expression on the protagonist's face. The blow was precise, and it seemed that a wave from the blow went through the entire hall. Something strange was happening, something that made the young man completely immersed in his blow, in his thoughts and actions. And the old man's face, in amazement, mixed with shock, surprise and everything else, acquired an overly surprised look. Rather, he was shocked. As expected, our main character overdid it, which is why his young body could not stand it and simply fell, and he himself lost consciousness for a while. While Yigang was lying on the floor, the ancestor continued to tower over him, seriously saying that he had just nearly disappeared because of the young man. The main character slightly raised his eyebrow and stood up, asking what happened. It turns out that he tried so hard to send the old man to another world that he even passed out himself. He finally rose to his feet completely and scratched the back of his head guiltily, asking if everything was okay with the old man, to which he quite seriously said that he had been imprudent. From long training and loss of consciousness, the main character turned pale again, and bruises appeared under his eyes. And the old man continued to talk, saying that during the time his student was passed out, he thought about everything. The student looks a little surprised at the back of his interlocutor, listening to him carefully. So, the old man said that touching the incorporeal is the first step in mastering the Taiyun meridian, and it's almost impossible to complete it in a quarter of a day. Only if his student did not experience death or a loss of the bodily shell, after which he was in a state of disembodied spirit. He concluded all this with the question of whether our main character has been reborn. The guy opened his eyes in shock, from sincere surprise. Just like that, he simply found out that Yi Gang had been reborn, although no one even thought about it among his circle. The old man smiled sincerely, because he just pointed his finger at the sky, but he still guessed right. Surprisingly, this boy is truly special. Immediately, the elder began to ask the student about who he was in a past life. The main character immediately remembered gadgets, cars, technologies. Is it even possible to explain all this to someone from this dimension? Apparently no, it's impossible, so he simply limited himself to the fact that he was a man who was a Jew in the distant future and everything was very different for them, because it was incredibly far from the time in their dimension. It was strange that someone like this ancestor took everything so calmly. For some reason, the old man was very happy that his student had been reborn, which is why he smiled with all third eye two teeth. He happily pointed at the main character and cried out that he was the perfect candidate to master his personal techniques. And the main character was the only possible person who could accept the old man's legacy. And just like that, their training continued further. The teacher's order to the student was to cut the moon in half, although, in fact, Yi Gan was still unable to do this. The young man put his hand on his chest. Throughout both his lives he thought that he was not capable of anything from the word at all, but now he is training and he seems to be special. His eyes shone with sincere joy, and his cheeks were covered with a light blush. It seems that life spared him, which couldn't help but rejoice. Some people started being clever again and said that Taiyun Complete Meridian could easily be confused with Taiyun Meridian, so they might choose a different name. And then I wanted to offer something. But as soon as he suggested calling her Jung, the young man immediately grimaced and firmly said no. The elder began to complain that his student did not even listen, but had already refused, to which the guy instantly said that Jung Tae, that's his uncle's name. The old man began to ask what was not, when suddenly he shut up and understood, so he quickly abandoned this name. Their conversation continued, but it was already late at night, so the main character probably went to bed soon. A month has already passed since that day. There were many servants in the training hall, and 3 of them allowed themselves to shirk their work, looking over the railing somewhere down. The one they were staring at was our main character. And what kind of servants would they be if they did not discuss him? One voice said that their young master had been training for about 3 hours. The second voice added that, in his opinion, as it seemed to him a month ago, the main character would quickly give up. The plump servant suggested that perhaps their master had finally matured, but the second one said that it did not look like the young man was doing anything worthwhile right now. In his opinion, what Yi Gan was doing now was not training at all. He was just waving his hands, that's all. The plump servant still insisted that their master had clearly matured, in his mind for sure. But the second one only crossed his arms over his chest and said that this was only because of envy of the younger master, because now he is the heir. The third voice asked why the servant disliked their master so much, and he said that their so-called lazy master didn't know how to do anything, and last year he overturned the table with something important because he was drunk. He also accused Yi Gan of only trying to show his best side in front of the elders, although it is too late, and this is only because he sees that his younger brother is many times better and more talented. Another voice was heard right behind them, serious and angry. It seems that they did not expect this from the word at all, because this someone approached quietly, unnoticed. This someone was the vassal of the Baek clan himself. Baek Ha Jun's mentor is known, even threatening in appearance. These 3 rats, especially the thin and old one, immediately began to apologize, although just a few seconds ago they were discussing their master at full speed, significantly humiliating him. The man said that these 3 rats would be flogged in any case, since they dared to talk about a member of the Beck clan. The man did not immediately go after the servants, but also watched Yi Gang, who was pretty exhausted due to the old man's training. The guy's efforts didn't amaze him at all, because even the servants understood his tricks. He needs to try even harder, to his full strength, because it even looks stupid. He clicked and thought again about his young master, Beck Ha-jun. He is handsome, he is young, he is diligent, not lazy, calm, reasonable, smart for his age. Only he is worthy to be the heir. In the eyes of the man, the eldest gentleman was a lazy drunkard, incapable of anything, and also sick. No one here respected or supported him. And even despite this, he, knowing what a fool he is, continues to train, at least taking some steps into the future. While he was watching the main character, it seems that he did something terrible, because the man's mouth dropped open from such a sight. The Ruby Training Hall is a precious structure obtained by defeating the Sacred Blade of Immortality, the leader of the Deathstrike cult. And he, the main character, dared to cook food here. Oh no, the man just can't allow that. This is too much. In one leap he went down to the hall where the guy was supposed to be studying and began to walk towards him very quickly, wanting to punish him. He was ready to stage a coup there, to force the guy to stop even thinking about eating in this room. It doesn't fit into any gates anymore. Suddenly, quite unexpectedly, the main character's voice erupted. He ordered, in a loud, cruel tone, the man to stop and stand in the place where he stopped. He began to ask whether cooking was now prohibited. This made the man wince and wince. Could his master really read thoughts? His face turned even more pale, and his pupils shrank when the main character said that people without food generally die. How does this 14-year-old boy, who only started working on himself a month ago, now guess all his actions? Is this even possible? The blockage of the chi channels weakened his body, but it seemed to strengthen his mind, since he could damn well hear the man's silent footsteps and his thoughts. Besides all this, the guy was cold. Real cold. It seemed like you could see a blue color emanating from it. Next, the guy asked, why didn't he just come up to say hello? The man even turned pale at this. Then the young man turned around, greeting Master Deng Jipun in surprise, as if he had just noticed. But the man knew that he, like a fox, was pretending. The man, to be honest, turned pale, because the young master acted as if he had just noticed him. But a few seconds ago he had read his thoughts. In the meantime, we must find out what really happened. At one point, the main character realized that he could not study. He was shaking too much because of the cold. The old man reminded that the completed Taiyun meridian had absorbed all of his yin qi. But later he will be able to control it. The young man decided to compensate for all his suffering with delicious food, to which the ancestor said in surprise that his student surprised him with his intelligence, because he embodied internal energy with the help of food. While the main character was working on food for himself, the ancestor was hanging from above, interestedly watching the process. It looked appetizing. The dish looks and smells incredible. But it was not clear to the ancestor what it was. The main character boasted that he had prepared food from the previous dimension, and the eldest was already approaching his food. To this, Yi Gon ordered him to stand still. The young man realized that his dish was a little bland, so he added more spices, and the old man began to ask how he guessed that more spices were needed. When he had added everything he needed, he finally tried his dish, and yes, it was just an incredible dish. The guy beamed from it, and the taste was exactly the same as what he felt in his dimension. Observing this picture, the elder again added that the guy had no manners. The guy rolled his eyes and answered the old man that cooking is not human manners, because without food people die. After this, the young man began to say that he learned to cook this dish when he was old, then he prepared it for his father and younger brother. This was the last thing they praised him for. He remembered how the guy immediately left, to which he asked out loud with interest, why didn't his younger brother just come up to say hello? But the guy's thoughts were interrupted by an old man who asked why the hell a strange man was standing over the guy and just staring at him. The main character almost choked when he saw the leader of the secret fog squad. The guy's hands even began to shake, because the elder would definitely not forgive him for cooking and eating food right here. But then, the man bowed sharply and began to apologize for some disrespect and greeted the guy. Our Yigan was quite surprised at this. What came over him? Moreover, he bowed and guiltily asked for forgiveness, because he forgot his place, since he decided to disturb the master's peace like that. It was impossible to even think about such a thing. Seeing Great Master Deng bow to him was simply incredible. The guy opened his mouth in surprise, because honestly he didn't expect this, and the man realized that he had already humiliated himself and it was time for him to leave, leaving the main character in bewilderment. And Gon turned his gaze to the man's feet, because they did not make a sound, as if they were light and delicate like a feather. Deng Jipun, nicknamed the Excellent Blade of the Crimson Demon. He earned this nickname due to his invisibility, because even first-class masters cannot recognize his presence. The old man asked something else about what had just happened, but the guy said that everything seemed to work out. It passed out on its own. They practiced. The guy weaved until the evening, but that was not all, because the guy needed to pick up the ladle. The young man began to complain that nothing had changed in a month of labor, to which the old man raised his hand, which he struck into the palm without effort. The elder said that even if the guy doesn't see progress now, it's by no means a problem, because it means he's destined to learn differently. The conversation turned to the relationship between Yigang and his brother, because apparently their relationship was not the best, and the interlocutor asked what had changed. The guy, to the old man's surprise, said that he himself had destroyed the relationship with his younger brother. He had pushed him away. At one point, Yigang simply destroyed all his brother's favorite things and toys, watching him painfully look at, no longer his things, but simple trash that should be thrown away. He also brought me to tears by pinching my cheeks painfully, with such force that small wounds later appeared on my cheek. By the time the main character had to leave, on his last journey, as everyone believed, the younger one did not even come to say goodbye. But the elder, to be honest, was not very surprised. He only told his student not to worry. Brothers in a family of warriors always end up raising swords against each other. The old man said that he also had a brother, a traitor who sent an assassin to him, but then he destroyed his dandian and severed the energy flow channel so that he could spend the rest of his life happily. The guy only replied that he didn't know that the sacred blade of immortality had a brother, or was. While talking, they reached the training room, where two people were already training. The first person Yigang immediately noticed was his younger brother, and the old man added that he looked really confused. The guy decided to just take the ladle as quickly as possible and walk away. While the main character was walking, it seems that someone behind him was trying to saw a real hole in him, and also, the old man really tensed up, who, as if mockingly, stood over the guy's soul, specifying that his younger brother would now destroy him with his gaze. The old man said that it was true that there was no worse enemy than Yigan for the younger one, but the main character could not answer, because it would be strange to interrupt this deathly silence by arguing with himself. Abruptly, in a way that no one expected, the younger gentleman rushed out of his seat towards his brother, to which even his teacher was surprised. And as soon as our main character wanted to leave the hall, the younger one blocked his way, still continuing to pierce him with his either evil or hostile gaze. The old man, next to the guy himself, made a remark that the younger gentleman was smart. He made the conclusion only from the incredible moonwalk of such a still young boy. He said that compared to the steps like an elephant and gone, this boy is something. The elder could not be soft. He abruptly changed and thundered at the younger, saying that if he dared to block the path, then why stand there like a fool and say nothing? He pushed the younger one away with his shoulder, saying that he had clearly forgotten the rules while Yigan was not here. The main character was impatient to finally leave, but he again did not let his older brother leave, sharply grabbing him by his clothes. He didn't just grab it, but to attract attention, he loudly screamed the word brother, to which everyone present in the hall opened their mouths in shock. Yigang was especially surprised, turning around in shock and raising his eyebrows. The younger one actually blushed himself. He himself did not expect that he would call this man brother and, like a child, would grab his clothes. Baek Yegon was always sick and weak, but by nature, even from early childhood, he was wise. Everyone loved him, there was not a single person who hated him. Sometimes he would make Baek Ha-jun spicy wonton soup. At those moments, his 10-year-old brother seemed to be the best of them all. And it always seemed to Baek Ha-jun that this smiling, handsome, sweet and beloved boy would always be there, making everyone who saw him smile. But everything has changed. One day everything became terrible, and from that moment nothing was good anymore. Baek Yegang began to constantly fly into a rage, through countless hysterics, refused medication and the help of doctors. And he didn't want to spend time with clan people. It was as if he suddenly began to hate them. Over time, even his own father turned away from Yegang. This child has become intolerant. Elders, servants, just people from the city. Everyone was whispering that the eldest master, Baek Yegang, had gone crazy, and now the younger gentleman, Baek Ha-jun, should become the heir. Then the younger one had no idea what had happened. He only dreamed that his beloved older brother would become his old self, play with him, cook with him, watch over him, and train. A little earlier, before the main character entered the hall, the younger gentleman and his mentor came to training, and immediately Ha-jung smelled a wonderful smell. When Jong asked what the smell was, the mentor said that his older brother had been training in this gym for about a month, and today he was cooking food here. But the younger one already knew what that smell was. He recognized the smell of the same soup that his beloved brother had prepared for him several years ago. And suddenly, hope flared up in his heart. Since my brother trains, he cooks. Perhaps everything will be the same as it was before? And under the influence of feelings, warm memories, the younger one was simply drawn to his brother. I just wanted to talk, he addressed his brother too childishly, so he immediately began to look for some kind of excuse. But this did not make the main character push his brother away. No, this made him smile, because he thought that everyone here hated him. He turned to his brother and said with a slight smile that Ha-jun was already old enough to call him brother, so now let him just call him brother. The guy walked away a little and asked what was the reason that his younger brother ran up so unexpectedly and stopped him. The sparkles in the child's eyes shone, and with hope in his voice he asked if they could, as before, practice with each other, together. The main character thought that this was some kind of revenge on him, because he couldn't even concentrate his chi energy. Malloy said that they, in fact, had to do without chi energy today. So he offered his brother training together. The younger gentleman suggested the game Words of the Goblin, something they played in childhood, only not a game, but a training session. The old man noted that he was glad that the training he had invented would be passed on by inheritance. And Gon, of course, was not against it, but they needed the consent of Zhang's mentor, Master Nung, who is responsible for the younger's training. The eldest gentleman thought that no one would allow him to play with Ha-jun, because Master Nung simply hated him, and it was clear that the main character would immediately lose. But, to great surprise, Nin agreed. The elder's mouth parted in surprise. It was so hard to believe the words of the master who hated him with all his soul. The younger one was happy, because now nothing prevents them from training. And the eldest actually stuck it and turns at both the master and his brother. Master Nung only wanted to know if Yegon was hiding any powers. The old man immediately intervened, asking if the main character really wanted to train, because then he could teach him how to make the body lighter, because Qigong training can literally soften the body. The old man recalled that his student had been learning to concentrate and use his will for a whole month. And perhaps, if he concentrates on the right thought, there will be a real chance of success. And as an incentive, the old man said that if his student wins, he will give a hint on how to live life beyond 20 years. The reaction was immediate. The eldest turned sharply to his brother and began to say that he was ready to play right now. The old man watched this picture, smiling slightly. He knew that Yi Gang, even without incentive, just wanted to play. I wanted it because I loved my brother. The time was apparently already late, but their time was just beginning. Yi Gon himself agreed that he was unlikely to win, and even if so, it would only be with the Taiyun Meridian. Even the elders called Zhang a genius. He is not the same kid anymore. The old man was always close to his student. He said that someone as small as Ha-jun is 1 in 100. But Yi-gon, at least for his own teacher, was one of the entire family who was truly strong, powerful and incredible, because that's why the old man chose him. He ordered to show his younger brother the difference between heaven and earth. Since the main character could not communicate openly, in front of people, with the old man, he conveyed messages mentally. Therefore, remembering how they say, he said that usually, younger people cannot compare with older ones, so he was confident in himself. The old man winced, not believing that his student was even thinking about such a thing. The old man said something else, but the guy didn't listen to the end, since Master Nin had already begun to speak, reminding him of the rules. Initially, in the game itself, children should throw bags of red beans at each other, with blindfolds on their eyes and bells on their belts. But, since this is a game, to make it more difficult, Master Nin removed the bells and wrapped rabbit fur in bags to muffle the sounds. They have a total of 5 bags. The game is up to 3 points. By hitting the enemy with the bag, one of them earns a point, but if the bag remains in the hand of the shooter, it is an automatic victory. The elder reminded the younger that as soon as he hit him with the bag, he always began to cry. The younger one, blushing in anticipation, said that this would never happen again. There was no countdown. Suddenly, at one moment, Master Nin announced that the game had begun. Both were in anticipation, both realized that they were now playing together with their brother, which made both of them breathless. The elder wanted to show Ha-jun how much he had changed. He wanted to prove to Master Nin that he was no longer the same. As soon as Yi-gang managed to catch the bag, a moment later, the younger one had already made his throw. And the throw was successful, right on target. Right into Yi-gon's chest. Master Nin grinned, because his student was a great guy, head and shoulders above Yi-gon, but he also paid attention to the second one. He was wondering if the training helped him in any way, whether he would lose quickly or not. The master immediately realized that he had begun to use the Taiyun meridian and thought that it seemed that some people were already giving up. At that moment, Ha-jun stopped hearing anything, or rather, he was confused by something. He could not aim and hit, because he could not listen properly. But, without being confused, with the bag in his hand, the younger one swung and threw with all his might, not initially hitting his opponent, although no, the elder himself gives in to meet the bag, which surprises Nin, who was watching all this. The main character is trying to catch the bag. But this is impossible. It is impossible to understand when the bag is only thrown at him, only when he is already nearby. Ha-jun's next attack was unsuccessful. The elder, as if he felt the bags, simply and easily dodged. Even though Zhang was winning, he was clearly quite confused about something. And, finally, Master Nin understood what was the matter, understood why the younger gentleman tensed up. For some time now, the sound of the elder gentleman's footsteps could not be heard from the word at all. He became silent, and there was no whistle from the fist cutting the air either. There was a feeling that Senior Mr. Baek Yi-gang had simply erased his presence in this room. If Master Nin had also been wearing a bandage, he obviously would not have realized that he was still there. All the sounds of Igon have become empty, but is it possible for a weak, sickly child to learn this in just 2 months? The younger one also understood that this was no longer the same game as before. They grew up, but became even stronger, especially the older brother, from whom there was not the slightest sound. Ha-jun always remembered their games together, how his beloved brother won, and tears came to his eyes and he began to cry. Suddenly a strange cold appeared around. The cold that shackled the body of the young boy with fear, who seemed to have completely ceased to understand what was happening. And he felt the cold instantly approaching him. Honored that he needed to dodge, but he didn't have time to dodge. Gon, our main character, with a bag in his hands, appeared right in front of the younger one, attacking him and automatically depriving the younger one of his chances of winning. Of course, the main character overdid it with the attack, because his brother flew away, falling to the floor with a roar. Master Nin looked at his student in shock, not understanding how he lost. It's simply impossible. The younger one seemed to be in shock, but with notes of delight and joy. All the feelings inside him were mixed up, his pupils narrowed, and there was still a blush on his cheeks. His gaze fell on the moon, The moon that was displayed in his eyes, which subdued, made him bow and lose. The younger brother never forgot how cruelly his beloved older brother disowned him. It was painful, cruel. This was very incomprehensible to the little boy, because he loved it. And the older brother was sorry. I regretted that he was like that. I regretted that I had to literally hate my younger, beloved, only brother for nothing. Thank you for watching. I will be grateful for your like. Hugs to everyone.